Hey guys, what's up? It's Adam from Adam's Trail Notes, and today I'm going to be editing this Milky Way image for you, right here. And this is all just going to be done in Lightroom, so no need to be super scared of like, oh, it's Photoshop, Milky Way, blah. No, this image is just going to be in Lightroom, so I'm just going to show you the basics and what Lightroom really can do, especially for night photography, because some photographers or people just getting into the craft, they think that they maybe need Photoshop and all of these fancy little editing tricks to really make the Milky Way pop, but that's really not necessary. It's just understanding Lightroom and the different settings that you can use to bring out the Milky Way in the night sky and the composition, the landscape, all of that. So I'm going to show you how to do all of that. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to get into it. But first, 1 second. Now, if you're new to the channel, this is my trail mix, and one of my friends made a joke about Adam's Trail Notes kind of sounding like Adam's Trail Mix, so I got some trail mix, and now I just have it in most videos. So this is my trail mix. I never eat it. It's been in my room for like 2 or 3 months. It kind of just stands there. But we're just going to put it right here to give us editing motivation for this image to come into fruition. So that's my trail mix. Awesome. Alright, and basically we are going to get into this. So let's go into Lightroom. So this is the image we are going to be editing. It was taken in Anza Desert State Park, and it features a dinosaur sculpture that was made by Ricardo Bracetta. And this guy made like 100-something sculptures out there, and these are life-size. I mean, that dinosaur sculpture is actually like 20 feet tall or something. They're really cool to photograph even or just look at during the day, but they're amazing to photograph and especially have the Milky Way behind at night. It looks like an intergalactic showdown or something like that. And this image was taken with my Nikon D750, which is a full-frame camera, and it does really well, especially for night photography and dealing with noise. And I shot this with my Tamron 15 to 30 millimeter lens, which is one of my favorite lenses ever. Very wide lens, very sharp. Love it. This was shot end of August, actually this was shot end of July, so that's why the Milky Way is looking a little more vertical. And basically, I'll show you some of the settings. So it was at ISO 8000, 24 millimeters, f2.8, and 15 seconds was my shutter speed. And these are usually my go-to settings. Of course, the shutter speed will depend on what focal length you're shooting at. These are pretty much my go-to settings for any night photography stuff. ISO 8000, especially for my camera, it seems to handle it pretty well. I mean, if you zoom in here, the noise isn't super bad, in the sky at least. On the foreground, it's a little bad, but we're really not going to pay attention to it, and I will show you how to clean that up, at least for this image. So basically, we're going to start the process. So what I first do for any night image is I scroll all the way down in Lightroom, go to Profile, the Lens Corrections, and we're going to go Remove Chromatic Aberration, which is just the corners. Sometimes they get condensed from the lenses, and we just kind of open them up a bit. And then Enable Profile Corrections, and Lightroom automatically finds my lens that I used, and it basically just removes some of the vignetting. So you see that, just removes the vignetting, opens the image up, and it makes it a little brighter for us without us having to change it, which is nice. Now what we're going to do is I basically just go down a list. I will show you a special trick for white balance in a bit, but first what I do is start with the exposure. So it is already a little bright. I'm going to probably only do about let's say 0.3, just because the sky is very bright and everything. Contrast, I don't like to go super hard on the contrast just because it can get overkill and just darken the whole image, and I don't really want that, so let's just do around 20, 28. And the highlights, let's just bring them down just a little bit. And really the highlights we're affecting is really just the light pollution kind of right here and maybe a little parts in here. And the shadows, what I'm going to do is just bring the shadows all the way down. And that's because there really is no detail in the foreground or in the dinosaur sculpture. It's mainly just a silhouette, and that's because I didn't use any lighting or anything. So what I'm going to do, especially an easy way to hide the noise, is honestly just to literally make it dark. So we almost made it perfectly dark, which is good, and I honestly think it looks better if it's just a perfect silhouette against the night sky, because it's a very stereotypical dinosaur silhouette, so that's cool. With the whites and blacks, a trick here is if you hold down the Alt key while clicking these, it's going to go to a full black square or white square, and then basically those little dots are basically when the perfect, as Lightroom like to say, the perfect kind of whites show up. So I usually play around with this. Sometimes I don't use it if it doesn't look that well and just kind of go from there. Blacks, you can do the exact same thing. And again, it just targets the blacks in the image, and it can bring them up or bring them down. In this case, we really want the blacks to go... Actually, in this case, we can bring them up just a little bit because it is affecting more of the sky, which is kind of nice. It just brings the blacks out a little more. In clarity here, this is where I see a lot of people kind of overuse it for night sky photography. Clarity for almost all of my night images starts out at about +8 or +10, and that's just because the image is so noisy already that you don't want to just overdo it with clarity and bring out the sharpness and the noise even more. So I really just keep it pretty light there. And this is where we're going to get into the white balance, is through the vibrance and saturation sliders. So what we're going to do is bump these up all the way. And this basically just shows what the extreme white balance was. And I don't know the exact setting. I think it was maybe fluorescent or tungsten that I used. It's more of a cooler and more magenta and blue white balance, and that's what I prefer with my Milky Way. So for this, since we know it is a little more blue, what we can do is just slowly start to manipulate this, and then you see it's going to start turning more magenta. And a good rule of thumb, at least for me, is I try and make this the most colorful when all of these are up, and then it'll get a really neutral white balance, and then from there we can start to tweak the colors and everything to make it look like a good Milky Way. So I'm just going to bring this up a little, and we can see there's a lot of purple in this, so I'm going to bring this purple slider down for the tint, and we're just going to bring it down just a bit, maybe here, because we don't want to bring it down too much or there's green that starts to get involved, and I don't like green in any of my night images. So that's good, and then let's just bring this down. And again, I'm just kind of trying to find a good balance between blue and orange here. And sometimes you can lean the other way, it just depends on the image and what your personal preference for Milky Way night photos are. So I'm going to try about here, maybe a little lower, maybe around here. So that's a pretty good balance of blue, orange, purple, and green. And then we're going to reset these sliders. And what you may notice is the Milky Way, or the whole image, kind of looks black and white. And that's just because we basically neutralized the white balance, so it really isn't too blue or too orange, it's perfectly in the middle. And this is a good starting point, because now what we can do is really manipulate the vibrance and saturation sliders and then pull out the colors we want and not just have too much of one blue or too much of an orange. So that's kind of my little trade secret I like to do. So with the vibrance, I like to bump this up pretty much because there isn't that much color to bring out, so the vibrance is really just going to pull out those colors that are pretty dormant. So about here, I usually go around 60 or 70. Saturation, you can be a little more lenient just because it will start to pull out a little more colors, like this green, I don't want that anywhere. So we're probably going to keep this on the lower side, maybe around 20 or 30. And so this is for the basic little tab right here. I think that's about good. Now, for the tone curve, if you haven't really used it that much, it's basically just an advanced contrast slider. So some people even prefer just not using the contrast slider and just go into the tone curve because it does give you a little more flexibility and range with your contrast, but I like using both. So basically I just start here and I'm going to pull it up just a little bit, and we're just increasing those highlights, and then go to the middle and just kind of decrease and then increase, kind of just to see what the image looks like with different points. And then go up here, and you can kind of see the higher that I go, the more specific highlights that it's going to affect. So up here, it's really just going to affect the brightest highlights in the image, which is kind of nice. So over here, and of course, some people refer to this as an S-curve. If you really drastically pulled these points differently, it would kind of form a small S. This one's a very, very skinny S, basically just a line. But again, it just gives you a little more control with the contrast in this image, which is very important for the Milky Way and the night sky to pop out. So we're going to go here, and then down here, what I found out is I really like when these parts of the Milky Way are popped out, or more saturated, I would say. So this is mainly an orange color, and what you can do is really just experiment. So when I bring the orange down, those parts go down. I want them popped out, but not too popped out, because then it just starts to look fake. So I'm going to go for about 20, I'd say about there, before it starts to look a little fake, so around there. And I just really like those parts accentuated in the Milky Way. And then the yellow, so the problem with the yellow, at least right here, is that's a lot of light pollution that we want to get rid of. So we're just going to bring down the yellow slider, and this is in the saturation part of it. So just bring down this a little bit. Actually, we can probably jump down a little more, so around 60, negative 60. And then, this is kind of like a little trade secret that not a lot of people use, is the highlights and shadows adjustments. Now for this is going to target specific colors in your highlights and then specific colors in your shadows. So for the hue part, what you're going to do is hold down Alt, and when you click and drag, it's really just going to show you different colors that the highlights can be. So let's see what they can be. So I want them a little more purple or a little more blue around this tone, so I'm going to do it here. And then what's cool about this is now you can control the saturation. So nothing's changed so far, but when I bump the saturation up, it's going to become more of that color. So now if I bumped it all the way up, it would just be just blue, which I don't want. So I want this maybe in the middle, and this is really just affecting the highlights again. The shadows, it's not going to affect that much just because the shadows are right here, and I'm going to make these almost completely just dark. So it's not really going to do that much. I'll just make it a little bluer, and then see how I like that. And it affects some parts of the sky, but not too much, so that's about it. Okay, so we're done with this part, and then we go down to detail, and the noise reduction here, I would recommend bumping it up to about 20. After about 20, it starts to look very smoothed out, and I don't really like that because then all the detail gets lost. I mean, even here you can see it's starting to get smoothed out, so what I can do is just bring this back a little bit, maybe to 16, and it's starting to just be a little better, a little smoother, but still there's detail in it. So now this is the overall image of the Milky Way we're done with, like the general image, but now we're just going to look for different parts that we can kind of manipulate and change for the better. So the first thing that catches my eye is this dark corner up here. It's pretty green and has some weird colors going around, and that's just because you're shooting at high ISOs at night. You're just going to get some weird colors in the sky. It's not just going to be perfect. So there's some green up here. There's a little red right here, and I don't really like that. And then I really want to darken the foreground. So those are my three things I want to change. So we're going to go up here to the brush tool right here, and then we're just basically, you can press O to select the show selected mask. So this means it's going to show you what you're painting. So when I paint here, it's going to show me what I'm painting over. So just this corner. Press O again to get rid of that color, and then we want that to be a little more purple, so we can just drag it, and that's too extreme of course, so we can just drag it here, maybe even manipulate this. And another trick that I found if I want to get rid of a color is just desaturate a little bit. So we're just going to desaturate just a tiny bit, and that should do the trick right here, and that makes it a little better. You can do other stuff, maybe fine-tune the color of it to match, so that's a little better. I like that. And then we can just click New to make a new brush selection, and we're going to just paint around here. I don't really like how red this part is, so again we're just painting this little area, and press O to deselect it, or just click this right here. And again, I'm just going to desaturate this a little because I don't want it, and you can see it's pretty does the job pretty well. Maybe add a little more blue in there, and then you can just fine adjustment just to make it match the sky a little more. And there's still just some parts right here that I don't really like, and that's pretty good with that. So we're going to click Done. And then I'm still, the Milky Way, honestly, the whole image looks a little brighter than I'd want it. So I'm going to darken it down just a little bit, and then maybe just add a little more contrast. I like my contrast, just like that. And the only other part that really bothers me about this image is this is still showing, basically. And you can see this is very noisy. It has a lot of magentas and reds going around. That's just because, especially on summer nights when your camera is shooting long exposures, it's going to heat up and introduce a lot of hot pixels and a lot of magenta and red into the darkest parts of the image, because there's really no detail in it that it didn't pick up. So that's why this is super noisy. I don't like it at all. So I want to hide it. So to do that, we're just going to darken it as much as we can. So we're basically going to just darken it just like the dinosaur is darkened here. So I'm going to increase my brush size, press O so I know what I'm painting, and we're just going to start painting this whole foreground area, even over here, just to make it a little easier. And a trick for if I want to paint the mountains but not the sky, you're going to hold down Control while you paint, and basically this is going to find edges, and it's going to just brush inside the edges. Kind of like when you're coloring, if you're coloring on the borders, it's going to hunt for those borders and just paint that. So this is a good way so I don't have to paint into the sky, because I don't want to affect the sky, just the foreground. And then increase the brush side. You can just use your scroll wheel, and we're just brushing in this whole foreground right here. And again, hold Control over here just so we can paint the foreground in, and then press O. So that whole foreground is selected. And what I want to do is bring the shadows all the way down. And that kind of did a little thing. Now what we're going to do is bring the blacks all the way down. And you can see it literally just looks totally black, like there's no information. So we're going to do that about here. We don't need to go all the way. And what I saw is, as I'm adjusting the blacks, you can see that we got a little something right there. So I brushed a little on the sky. So to fix that, what we can do is go back into our brush settings, and every brush point that I've made, it saves it. So you can see the corner ones I've already done, and the one right here. So if I click this, and I'll press O so I can keep it, there's a little fuzz of a brush up here, and I don't want that. So you're going to hold down the Alt key to basically subtract anything that you brushed. And then you can see this is just going to take it away. And then, what I can do is just carefully brush this in right here. You can get really detailed if you want, just like that. And click Done. And there we go. That looks like a pretty good Milky Way to me. And this is all done in Lightroom, pretty easy, simple settings. And I only used like 3 of the tabs. And a way to see the before and after, which is honestly my favorite part, is click the backslash key, and you can see before and after, before and after. So we darkened the whole foreground, we made the Milky Way a little more pop and saturated. And actually one more thing we can do is, for the brush tool again, we can just select the Milky Way. So we're going to just paint the Milky Way in, so we can maybe brighten it up, saturate it, and it just affects the Milky Way and nothing else. And we're just going to do very subtle adjustments because we don't want to make it too fake. Okay, so for the brush, we're just going to very slightly, maybe like 0.06, and just very slightly do this just to adjust the Milky Way, the core galaxy, the galactic core. And then I like to bring the whites up a little bit, and maybe the saturation just a tad. Right there. That looks pretty good. And click Done. And then again, backslash key. And look at that. We got a Milky Way image. That's pretty cool. Alright, well, I really hope you enjoyed my tips and tricks about this Milky Way image. I love night photography, and editing the photos is a whole art to itself besides just taking the picture. So I hope you learned some stuff about editing the Milky Way image and how much you can really do in Lightroom. You really don't need Photoshop for a lot of this stuff. You can just use Lightroom. It's pretty simple. And please comment down below, like and subscribe, and turn on that little notification bell so you are always notified when I post a new video. Because, I mean, come on. Don't you just want to see videos of mine all the time, right? Thank you. I hope you do. Also, you can download my free photography cheat sheet. It's going to tell you about manual mode, so shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. And you can download that, print it, take it wherever you want. If you're ever stuck on manual mode, you can just review the settings, and it shows you a summary of basically what manual mode does and how it can improve your images. And stay tuned, I am going to be releasing a new little cheat sheet. It's going to be an astrophotography checklist that will tell you exactly what you need to take great night photos, and it will tell you settings you need for star trails and Milky Way photography. So I'm going to be releasing that in the next few days, so stay tuned for that. It's going to help you a lot for night sky images, especially people starting out or overwhelmed with everything. It's going to help you out a lot. So I'm really happy to release that soon, and I really hope you enjoyed the video. Yeah, keep photographing, and I'll see you out there. Okay. And basically, and then basically are basically new. It's basically, so basically,